It's time to get ready for the 2023 NFL Draft through the lens of wide receivers and how the Bills should attack the position group today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast, and I am your host of Locked On Bills. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome to our everydayers. You know who you are, those of you who never miss a single episode. I appreciate you being here every single day. Please be sure to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. Have you ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your football franchise? Then this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using promo code LOCKEDON in the game. Well, folks, it's time to talk wide receivers, the Bills, and the 2023 NFL Draft. I'm very much looking forward to sharing my thoughts here with you today on this topic. So we'll start things off by examining the current situation for the Buffalo Bills at wide receiver and identifying some critical X factors as we consider this position group entering the 2023 season. And then I want to give you my rankings. And I've got 11 receivers graded in the first 3 rounds that I think the Bills should be considering. And so I'm going to give you my Buffalo Bills specific wide receiver rankings for the first 3 rounds. I'll talk about some other guys that I like maybe in the 4th round as well. But we're really focusing in on those first 3 rounds where the Bills can find an impact player, a guy that can really come in and command some market share and be a building block for the offense moving forward. And so hopefully by the end of this conversation, you have a really good feel for how I perceive this wide receiver class and what the Bills should do to participate in it and take advantage of the talent that's available to them. So let's start by examining the current situation very quickly here. The Bills obviously have a true, legitimate wide receiver one of the best receivers in the entire NFL, and Stephon Diggs, who signed long-term. You don't really have any questions there. Well, then you kind of get into some questions right after that. You have Gabe Davis as your number 2, and regardless of whatever you think of Gabriel Davis, he's on an expiring contract. So the Bills will have to do something with him in the next calendar year. And so if there's an extension to be had, if he's somebody the Bills want to replace, well, this draft pick or these draft picks become very important in considering that piece of it. Then I think your number 3 right now is Khalil Shakir, who's a second-year player, now 5th rounder out of Boise State. I'm very high on Khalil Shakir, but what did he catch, 10 passes last year? So there's obviously, you're counting on growth there. You're counting on him to be able to step in. Then you have Deontay Hardy, who I've done an entire episode on, kind of breaking down his skill set and what he brings to the table. And, he's a player that has some versatility to play outside and inside, a smaller guy, but some speed, some injury questions there. Your number 5 is Trent Sherfield, who I feel good about as a number 5 receiver, gives some size, some blocking ability, some competitive toughness. And then you have your practice squad guys, Keyshawn Johnson, Isaiah Coulter, Desmond Patton. You're not really counting on much from those players. But as I consider the landscape of this current wide receiver core, you've got room right now, in my opinion. You got a room right now to add in a guy that cuts into everyone's market share. Somebody that can really challenge to be the number 3 this year, maybe the number 2 next year, if you don't bring back Gabe Davis. And I'd like to get ahead of it. If Gabe Davis isn't going to be back, you'd like to get that player that's going to replace him in the building right now to get that chemistry down with Josh Allen and get that familiarity down in the system. So I think you've got some X factors here that I want to identify. First of all, I mentioned it already, but Khalil Shakir's development. There's a chance that he comes in, he's the wide receiver 3 and has a productive season, and the Bills have found themselves a nice steal. I like the skill set for Khalil Shakir. The route running, the hands, the inside-outside versatility, the athleticism, I like it all. But obviously, He's got to earn a bigger opportunity, and he has to capitalize on that opportunity. And then you have these two new players in Deontay Hardy and Trent Sherfield, who I like the idea of them in this offense, but we've never seen them in this offense. We've never seen them catch a pass from Josh Allen. There's a lot to like there, but that's an unknown piece of what this group looks like in 2023. And then, of course, Gabe Davis in a contract year. Now, that's exciting because you get Gabe Davis in a contract year. You feel like you get the best version of him, and he's ready to cash in on a big season that propels him to a nice big old contract. Let's hope it happens. And so those are some of the big things on my mind as I forecast this group in 2023. And then there's always this piece of information in the back of my mind. Josh Allen loves throwing the football to wide receivers. If you look at the target disbursement in the Bills offense over the last several seasons, he's throwing the ball to wide receivers and not so much tight ends and running backs. The Bills tight ends and running backs continue to be, I guess, towards the bottom of the league in terms of market share. But the wide receivers are always getting opportunities. And so with that in mind, I'm always thinking about making sure that this cupboard is full of receiving talent for Josh Allen, because that's who he likes to throw the football to. That's what he's told us over the last several seasons of his career. He likes throwing the football to wide receivers. You want to make sure that he's got a nice arsenal to target. And so how could the Bills add to this group in the 2023 NFL Draft? Like I said, there's an opportunity right now for targets, and we certainly know that there's an opportunity in the future for targets as well. And so we're going to talk about who the Bills could consider and when here in just a moment. But first, I do need to tell you a little bit more about Ultimate Football GM. You've heard me talk about this game before. And if you think you'd make a good NFL GM, well, you got to give this game a try. When you play Ultimate Football GM, you get to control and manage every strategic aspect of your team as you play through seasons and you try to build a dynasty. With Ultimate Football GM, you're responsible for hiring coaches and coordinators, managing the finances, including negotiating player salaries and terms. You got to deal with the draft, free agency, player issues, personnel issues, injuries, all the ups and downs of a season. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline, on the go, as you want and when you want to. Locked On Bills listeners, you get a 100% free boost to your franchise when using promo code Locked On in the game. That's Locked On, so make sure to check it out today. To download the game, again, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM, start your dynasty today. So I spent a good part of last week and, of course, the weekend finalizing my rankings for the Bills and the wide receivers. And I got to be honest with you, the order came out a little different than I thought it might. But we studied the tape, and we feel good about the way that they stack up. And so as I get into these players and talk about when the Bills should draft them and what their skill sets are and what the concerns that I have with them are, this is going to be pretty revealing because I think there's some pretty clear tiers. I think you've got a top two. Then I think you got a big old chunk, like number 3 through the next 7, like 3 through 9 are pretty closely graded players for me, where I don't have a whole lot of distinguishing between them. I think they're very closely graded players. And then I think you got a couple that make sense to me as third round targets and then kind of the next bucket. But this came out looking a little bit different than I thought it would. Now, one thing that isn't different is who I have at number 1. And I think it's clearly the best receiver in this class. That's Jackson Smith-Njigba out of Ohio State. 6 foot and 5/8 of an inch, 196 pounds, 30.5-inch arms. His RAS score comes in at an 8.29. Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think, in so many ways would be perfect for the Bills offense. The route running to the middle of the field, the hands, the ball skills, the competitive toughness. There's something just very natural about watching Jackson Smith-Njigba play football. It's a game that comes to him, at least he makes it look easy, right? Everything he does is smooth. It's purposeful. I love the way he plays the game. And I think he'd be a great weapon for any offense, but especially for the Bills, where that route running to the middle of the field, I think, is something missing from players not named Stephon Diggs in this offense. And I would like what he offers. Now, with Jackson Smith-Njigba, you're not getting a burner. right? You're not getting a guy that's just going to run away from people. You're not getting a guy who is necessarily a player with a ton of outside production, right? He primarily played from the slot at Ohio State. I think he projects well outside, but I need to see it, right? He's still got to embrace those heavyweight battles, as I like to put them. When you play out on the perimeter with consistency, you don't get those two-way goes and those free releases. You got to deal with somebody potentially stacked right on top of you that's going to want to contact you at the line of scrimmage. So Jackson Smith-Njigba hasn't been tested in those ways, so he'll need to prove himself there. But just a natural player with the route running hands that I just love. And again, just the natural way that he plays the game. It comes he makes it look very easy. And I think that's always the sign of a really good player, is what they're doing on the field. If it looks easy for them, I mean, these are hard things, but they make it look easy. I love that about JSN. I don't know if he gets to 27, folks. If the Bills really want him, I think they have to move up. But I do think he's very clearly the top receiver in this class, especially for the Buffalo Bills. Coming in at number 2, I thought this was very clearly the number 2 receiver, and I thought this guy would be lumped in with some other guys, but I think he's a step ahead, and that's Zay Flowers out of Boston College. Would like him. He'd be okay for me at the end of the first round, kind of have a first, second round grade. Jackson Smith is a true first round grade. Zay Flowers kind of a 1-2. Receiver, Boston College, 5'9", 182, 29.25-inch arms, an RAS score of 8.3. So he's not a very big guy, and that's going to be pretty much the case for a lot of the players we're about to talk about, some smaller receivers. But Zay Flowers, my goodness, the change of direction skills here are off the charts. The route running, I think, is pristine, and I like that he can run routes to all levels of the field. Very twitchy and dynamic. The way that he gets into his routes, the way he gets in and out of breaks, it's really good. Very deceptive. I like that he doesn't tip routes, and he's got a lot of twitch and athleticism to force some false steps from the corners and attack blind spots and get open. I mean, I love the route running. I watched Zay Flowers and thought to myself, that's a receiver that I can really envision Josh Allen throwing the football to. That's what I really love about him, is it just feels like a very natural fit in the Bills offense and for the style of receiver that we've seen Josh Allen have success throwing the football to. I think he can win vertically, really dynamic with the ball in his hands. Not that he's a big time like tackle breaker or anything like that, but that change of direction, that twitch, that acceleration makes him tough to tackle. And whether it's yards after catch, quick separation, vertical ability, you get it all in Zay Flowers. Again, not a whole lot of catch radius or size. Probably going to play a lot from the slot. But, man, do I think that he would be a wonderful complement to this Bills offense. And just you can watch him play and think to yourself, I could see myself with Josh Allen throwing the football to him with some of the routes that he was running and the way that he played the game. I think it'd be a really good marriage. All right, now you have guys that I really don't love in the first round. They're good players, but I think they're more second-round picks. But I think when you're picking at number 27, you probably have to resolve to you're not likely to get a true first-round player. So these guys are more ideally second-round picks to me, but like I mentioned there, you don't really have 27 first-round grades in any draft, and so you're more than likely going to pick a player that doesn't have a first-round grade in the first round. But my wide receiver 3 is Jordan Addison from USC. And like I said here, this is a tier separator. I think you got Jackson Smith-Njigba, Zay Flowers, and then you have this bucket. The next 7 players I think are very, very close for me. But the guy that I have next is Jordan Addison out of USC, 5'11", 173 pounds, 30 7/8-inch arms. His RAS score came in at a very disappointing 5.90. I'll tell you what, I was very familiar with Jordan Addison at Pitt, and I loved the player that I saw there. Didn't love the player as much at Oklahoma. I feel like that offense really simplified what they asked him to do, and therefore he didn't get a chance to showcase his full skill set like we saw at Pitt with Mark Whipple as the offensive coordinator and Kenny Pickett as a quarterback there. Just a very limited route tree for him at USC, and I thought it just took away from showing that full skill set, to be completely honest with you. But the route running here is really good. I like his separation quickness. Really like him from the slot, that ability to run some choice routes, to run some bench routes, some quick outs, that stuff, he creates some nice separation, and you can feel like he's a nice chain mover type player. I do think that you're not getting as dynamic of an athlete as you would, of course, in Zay Flowers, but also in a lot of guys in this bucket. So for a 5'11", 173, modest catch radius, but like just an okay athletic profile, right? That's something that you're certainly mindful of. There's a lot to like about Jordan Addison. There's some limitations there. I feel like he'll have to expand his route tree kind of back to what he was doing at Pitt, because I felt like he was kind of limited with what they were asked him to do at USC. So he's a really nice player. I don't think he's as complete as Zay Flowers. I don't think he has the vertical juice as well that you see from Zay Flowers. So there's a lot to like in Jordan Addison, but I think he's a tick below Zay in my mind. Number 4, this might be like, he's not he's not the number 1 receiver for me, but I think he's like my favorite receiver. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't measure up to the 3 guys ahead of him quite as much, but I love this guy. It's Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma. Came in just a tick under 5'11", so 5'0" or 5'107", so 5'10" and 7/8, 183 pounds. And like 183 pounds feels like a massive receiver, because like 4 of the next 5 are like in the 170s that I have to talk about. So 183 pounds was something pleasant to see. 31 and 5/8 inch arms, an RAS score of a 939. So a really dynamic athlete here at 5'11", 183. I said this about Marvin Mims a number of times, but if you watched Jahan Dotson last year at Penn State, wound up being a first-round pick for the Washington Commanders, I think you get so much of that player in Marvin Mims, where there's just a dog in this dude. Just the way he competes at the catch point, the way that he addresses contact for a smaller receiver, you just love that about him. He's got really good hands, and I feel like he's a player that really fits well with the Bills, and kind of some similar thoughts that I had about Zay Flowers, where you can just see Josh Allen throwing this guy the football and it being a successful hookup. Mims has been pretty productive for Oklahoma, as a little bit more size and athleticism than some of these other small receivers that we're going to talk about and that we have talked about. And like I said, I like the little receivers that kind of play bigger, and you get that from Marvin Mims. So I'm a big fan. I would love him somewhere on day 2. My wide receiver 5 is Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee. 6 foot on the dot, 176 pounds, so a very lean build. It's like 6 foot 176. That is slender. 32.5-inch arms, an RAS score of an 8.73. Jalen Hyatt might be the best vertical receiver in this class. So if you were looking for that burner, a guy that can just get behind secondaries and win down the field and has speed and ball skills, you can get. I don't think you can do better than Jalen Hyatt in this class. Ton of production doing that at Tennessee this past season. And I was really encouraged by the ball skills that he demonstrated to show with that ability to separate vertically. Really productive this last year for the Vols. When Cedric Tillman got injured, they really leaned on Jalen Hyatt, and he delivered. There's questions here. Like I said, slender build, right? There's no question about that. Coming from this Josh Heupel offense that is ISO spread, just nothing like what he'll be asked to do in the NFL. So I think there's a big curve to what's going to be on his plate and what he's going to have to adapt to. Also, really, really kind of a slot-only guy in college. And so how is he going to transition to the outside with that type of body type? I know that teams have to respect that ability for him to win vertically, but also, he's not an elite speed guy in that you're super concerned about not being physical with him at the line of scrimmage, right? That's something that he's going to have to showcase, is that ability to beat press coverage, because he didn't really get tasked with it in college, and only 1 year of meaningful production at Tennessee. So some questions there, but if the Bills wanted a true vertical burner that I think has the capacity to develop into something more, Jalen Hyatt in the second round makes a lot of sense to me. All right, folks, we need to take a quick break here, but I've got, 6 more receivers that I think are worth day 2 picks. I want to get into the other options and then just some general thoughts on exactly how the Bills should attack this position group coming up after a very quick break. All right, so I gave you my top 5 wide receivers. They're Jackson Smith-Njigba at 1 out of Ohio State. Number 2, Zay Flowers out of Boston College. Number 3, Jordan Addison out of USC. Number 4, Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma. Number 5, Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee. The next player, number 6, is Tyler Scott out of Cincinnati. 5'9" and 7/8, 177 pounds, 30 and 7/8 inch arms, an RAS score of an 8.55. Tyler Scott is a player that I really like. Yards after catch ability is there. Route running is absolutely there. Vertical separation is there. A competitive toughness that you love is there. He just has some inconsistency with his hands. He just has some drops. I think that's part of the deal. You kind of have to live with that with him. But I think he's pretty complete otherwise outside of the size component. But watching him accelerate on tape, I mean, he's got pull away speed. He's got pull away game speed that I really, really like. And if he was more consistent with his hands, he'd be higher on this list for me. But some of those drops are very, very frustrating. And you don't want to have to live with too much of that. And that's obviously a question that I have with Tyler Scott. But everything else is really, really good outside of some drops and some size issues. But a really dynamic playmaker that if he can shore up his hands, he would be higher on this list. And number 7 for me is Josh Downs out of North Carolina. 5'0", 171 pounds, 30 and 3/8 inch arms, an RAS score of an 8.99. I like Josh Downs a lot. Just came in small, sub 5'9", 170 pounds, not a whole lot of length there. A guy that really played only from the slot from North Carolina. I don't think he projects that well to playing outside. Route running there, I think is got to be improved. He's not super crisp. You for a guy like him, you'd expect him to be really sharp and crisp in and out of breaks. I thought he rounded a lot of stuff. I think part of that's just the offense, that Phil Longo offense. That it was actually the one that Dawson Knox and DK Metcalf and all those guys at Ole Miss played in, and I think it just really limits the ability for you to see the full skill set of a player. And so Josh wasn't asked to run a ton of different routes, a lot of just attacking space and getting him the football on some manufactured touches and asking him to create. And I think he's pretty twitchy and dynamic with the ball in his hands, but he's not one to really force missed tackles or break tackles. So for a smaller, explosive receiver, maybe you just wish there was a little more there, and obviously a little bit more refinement with the route running. I think he'd be a nice middle of day 2 type pick, but I'm not really going to pound the table for him any higher. I like Josh Downs. I don't know that I love him. All right, now we're going to get into a ranking that I'm sure is going to surprise some people. At number 8, I have Quentin Johnson out of TCU. 6'0", 208 pounds, 33 and 5/8 inch arms, 8.67 RAS score. So finally we got some guy with some size on him, but I have questions about the skill sets. First of all, let's talk about what I like about Quentin Johnson. For a bigger receiver, his hip sync and his ability to get in and out of breaks is really good. And you don't expect a guy with his frame to be as talented with the ball in his hands as you get from Quentin Johnson. So I like that. But I think this guy needs a lot of work as a route runner. His hands really scare me. He's a body catcher. He wasn't a ball winner in the Big 12, right? So for a bigger receiver, you want him to be a ball winner, a guy that can win in some of those contested situations. I didn't love that from him at TCU. And I just get nervous about these possession style, big bodied, catch radius, Big 12 receivers. It's a different ball game for them. And I think we're seeing so many of them come to the NFL and not have a lot of success. And so I'm nervous about that with Quentin Johnson. He's going to go a lot higher than where I have him graded. And that'll be the case for a lot of players, but there's just guys that I would let somebody else take the chance on. You can find out if he's going to translate to the next level. I'm good with going in some other direction. So Quentin Johnston, don't love him. To me, I think you start getting to the later part of the second round, early third, like that's where I get a little bit more comfortable. Somebody's going to draft him much higher. All the best. I hope he's an awesome player. It just wouldn't be for me. Number 9 is Cedric Tillman out of Tennessee. 6'0", 213 pounds, 32 and 3/4 inch arms, 8.66 RAS. This guy played the Gabe Davis role in Josh Heupel's offense, that static aligned right receiver, a lot of double moves, vertical stuff, some deep in breaking routes, and did well. And unfortunately, this past year, he dealt with an injury that really limited him, but the year before, I thought he had a chance to be early second round, maybe a late first round pick, and maybe he still has that opportunity. And we're a little bit forgetting about him because of the injuries this past season and him not necessarily having the production, and then Jalen Hyatt winds up blowing up. But for a big-bodied receiver, I think I like him more than Quentin Johnston in that capacity. I think maybe there's more ceiling with Quentin Johnston, and so that's why I have him like barely ahead of him. And if you looked at the numeric scoring, it's very, very close. So I like Cedric Tillman. I feel like the Bills kind of have this player already in some ways in Gabe Davis. And I don't know that he's going to be a do-everything type player in terms of the route tree. But if you wanted a height, weight, speed receiver that has physicality that can play on the outside, Cedric Tillman's that type of dude. At number 10, Jaden Reed, Michigan State. This is the next tier. This is my third round guy. So everyone that I said prior is a first or second round guy. And really the only first rounder is Jackson Smith-Njigba. Then Zay Flowers is kind of a 1-2, then a bunch of 2s. Now this gets you to the next bucket, if you will, kind of that third round bucket. So Jaden Reed, 5'10" and 7/8, 187 pounds, 30.5-inch arms, RAS score of a 6.73. He's got good vertical speed. His shuttles were not very good. His agilities, his 3-cone drill and short shuttle. That's what really brought down his RAS score. Jaden Reed, man, there's a lot to like here. I like the route running. I like the yards after catch. He's got punt return ability. You see him uncover quickly. You see him win down the field. You see him make people miss in space. He's a nice player, and I think he's one of those guys that if you're thinking about picking Josh Downs in the second round, you say, maybe we can get Jaden Reed in the third round and get somebody else here and feel like we're getting a comparable receiver, but we can get a help at another position at the same time. Does have some questions, a little bit older of a prospect, and so you think about that. Had some injury stuff as well, but also a guy that you don't necessarily think he's going to be a consistent winner on the perimeter, right? Playing on the line of scrimmage as a true outside threat, probably having to play a little bit more from the slot. But I think and he's got some hand stuff where you wish there was a little bit more consistency with his hands. But Jaden Reed in the third round is the player that you like. Even Tyler Scott, if you say, we're going to take Tyler Scott in the second round or Josh Downs in the second round, can we just wait and get Jaden Reed in the third round? That type of player where there's so many comparisons to the skill set. But I wish that he had a little bit more shiftiness to him for that style of player, but I like him in the third round. I think he can be a really productive NFL slot. And the last guy that I'll mention here is Jonathan Mingo, number 11 out of Ole Miss, 6'0", so almost 6'2", 220 pounds, 32.125-inch arms, and RAS score of 9.86. I think this is the height, weight, speed guy. If you're looking to pick one in the first 3 rounds, if you want a true height, weight, speed, this is what you're getting here. Some really impressive moments at the catch point, some crazy one-handed catches. You love that about him. Has played some in the slot too. So if you're looking for that big slot role or a guy that can, win some big boy matchups on the outside, you like that as well. Okay production at Ole Miss. He's a guy that definitely has build-up speed, right? There's some gradual acceleration to the way that he runs. But once he opens up, once he gets to kind of that flying 20, like not super explosive right away, but that flying 20 where he can really get even and run away from people, he's got some of that. But I watching him play, I don't see a ton of separation. And so I think there's some questions that I have there about his ability to get away from people and run a full route tree. But if you want that height, weight, speed, upside guy in the third round, Jonathan Mingo is a guy that really stands out to me. I want to mention some other names here. The first one is Rashee Rice out of SMU. I don't think he's going to be an option for the Bills. I don't think they'll have him on the board. There's some red flags there that I think will push him off of the Bills board. I think from a skill set perspective, there's a lot to like in the first 3 rounds. Don't think he'll be an option for the Bills. Some other names that I like, but they're more fourth round guys to me. Tank Dell out of Houston. I know he's got a lot of fans, and I like him too, but he's 5'8", 165 pounds. That is just so small, and he's like 24 years old. So he becomes part of the conversation in the 4th round for me. Trey Palmer out of Nebraska. Love him as a vertical 9-ball type player. I wonder about the completeness of his skill set outside of that. Xavier Hutchinson out of Iowa State. Would love him, 4th round type player. I think in some ways he can be a Gabe Davis type player for the Bills that is a better route runner, right? I like the ball skills. I like the way that he plays, the competitive toughness, the blocking. But I think he offers a little bit more in terms of in-breaking route ability to the middle of the field. A.T. Perry out of Wake Forest is a nice mid-round option. Dentavia Wicks out of Virginia is a nice mid-round option. So there's some guys that I like. But I think those first 11 really are the guys that if I were the Bills, I would really want to come away with one of those 11 players. And whether that's, okay, you feel like you have to have Jackson Smith-Njigba or Zay Flowers and you need to do whatever it takes to get him, or if you kind of want to wait and say, hey, there's value on day 2 here. I think coming away with one of the 11 players that I really detailed would be how the Bills should do it. Now, there's the value game here, and I think most of the value comes on day 2. I really do. And so if the Bills waited, I would be fine with that. If they sat there and picked Zay Flowers, I'd be fine with that. If they moved up a little, not a lot, for Jackson Smith-Njigba, I'd be fine with that. So I think there's a number of ways to get what they need here. And there's a variety of skill sets. If they want an inside-outside guy, there's option. If they want a true slot, there's options. If they want a height, weight, speed guy, there's options. And so I don't know if there's a ton of like super complete receivers where you say, wow, I get everything. I get size, athleticism, route running, yards after catch. Like those players aren't really here in this class. But I think, whatever flavor of ice cream you like, you can find that type of player. And so it'll be on the Bills to identify which one of these guys is the right fit for their offense. But that whole conversation that we had at the beginning about, hey, being able to get that guy right now to challenge, to be a really meaningful option long-term, the Bills can do it in this class. And I think they should. I think they should make it a priority to come away with one of those 11 players that I mentioned. So we'll see if they do. We'll see if they do. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of things that I think the Bills should do, and checking every one of those boxes might get a little challenging because you only have so many draft picks. But if wide receivers high on Brandon Beane's to-do list, I think you'll have a nice opportunity to get a meaningful weapon. All right, folks, that is going to do it for us here today on the podcast. This week, we're going to focus on really finishing this draft preview stuff. The draft is next week. So we're going to get tight ends done probably tomorrow, edge rushers later in the week. Want to talk a little interior offensive line, maybe a few running backs, maybe a few safeties. So all of that's coming your way. We'll hear from Brandon Beane at some point for his pre-draft press conference. So that'll be there for you at some point. We'll make sure that I talk about every player that the Bills have in for a 30 visit. That'll be part of our conversations over the next week as well. So make sure that you are subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.